Chapter 2621. The man gnashed his teeth and rushed toward Mahina. Mahina evaded and gave the man a left hook punch, making him take a few steps back. Seeing how he couldn't win over a woman, he turned to leave but was kicked from the back and fell to the floor. The wallet in his hand flew out. Mahina stepped on his back and grabbed him by his collar. "Are you blind? You're too dumb to steal my purse." Another punch landed on his face. Dylan finally caught up and watched Mahina beat that man up so fiercely. He was petrified, as if the filter he had on was shattered. Meanwhile, a car was parked outside of the center. Cameron got out with Waylon, and they were surprised when they stepped into the hall. Mr. Goldman was here. Other than the two of them, even Harold and Conroy were there. They brought crates of alcohol with them too. Soon, Mahina and Dylan came back with the food. Dylan was happy when he left, but now he looked like a deflated balloon. Everyone started surrounding the barbecue. 3 tables were pushed together, and there were 2 grills. Meat, seafood, vegetables, and other food covered the tables. Waylon sat next to Cameron. He didn't have to grill anything because Cameron was the one getting it for him. "Eat more. Don't be shy." Waylon smiled and started eating. Conroy suddenly asked, "Cam, when are you going to have your wedding?" "We're excited to be there." Nick looked up at them. Cam paused for a few seconds, but Mahina jumped in before she spoke. "Didn't they already have a wedding in the East Islands?" Someone replied, "That was just the bride's side. The groom's side should be done in Bassburg. It will probably be a grand occasion." Waylon looked at Cameron. "We'll have one soon." Cameron was surprised that he had already decided. "Are you sure?" He smiled and said, "Yes, we're going to have our wedding before we have a kid." Harold chimed in, "Don't forget to invite us." Conroy said, "Make sure you bring a huge gift." Harold thumped his chest. "No problem." Cameron was a little shy about it as she covered her face. "Whatever." Everyone laughed and enjoyed the happy moment. After they finished half the alcohol, the food was almost gone. When Nick went upstairs, Waylon stopped him, and they talked in the corridor. "Should I congratulate you?" Waylon nodded. "Yes, I hope that you'll attend our wedding." Nick looked at him, and then after a long pause, his eyes darted around. "I will attend it. I'm her friend." "Friend?" Waylon smiled. "I thought you wanted more than that." Nick faced the cold streets outside the window. "I have to admit that I was once attracted to her, but I'm sure that I wouldn't be able to be the one who makes her happy. All I wish is for her to be happy." After that, he turned around and faced Waylon. "I believe that's something you can do." Waylon looked into his eyes with a serious expression. "I'll never let her down." After dinner and drinks, everyone left at 8:30 p.m. Cameron said goodbye to them and left in Waylon's car. Chapter 2622. Cameron leaned closer to Waylon on the way back. "What did you say to Nick?" Waylon looked at her and smiled. "I invited him to our wedding, of course." "Did he agree?" "Yes, of course." Cameron leaned back into her seat and smiled. "I thought you would start arguing." Waylon held her hand and kissed it. "You were not worried that we'd fight instead?" She said in a serious tone, "It's not good to fight." "I don't think you'd fight in front of everyone." He chuckled. "You're starting to sound reasonable." Cameron pulled her hand back. "I'll show you who's boss for teasing me." Waylon's phone suddenly rang, and it was Morrison. He answered, "What's up?" "Wayne, come and party with me. There are a few mixed heritage beauties at Glitz. They're so hot." When he saw Cameron leaning in, Waylon said without hesitation, "No, I'm going to spend time with my wife." He hung up and looked at her. "Why, do you want to go?" Her eyes gleamed. "Can I?" "No, there's nothing to do at home anyway. Let's go see some hotties." Waylon pinched her chin. "You can look at me." Cameron pushed his hand away. "I'm letting you see some pretty girls, but you're refusing." He nodded. "I would consider it if I got to go alone." Cameron ignored the fact that he was driving and punched him. Wayne Goldman. At Glitz. Morrison leaned back and watched the dancers perform on stage. He slowly drank his wine while a woman with heavy makeup walked over. "Are you alone, hottie?" Morrison looked at her, swirled his glass, and smiled. "Of course not." She smiled. "You're lying." I noticed that you've been by yourself all night. Morrison leaned in. Can't you see that someone is sitting next to me? The woman looked at the empty seat next to him curiously. There's no one there. My wife and kids are there. Can't you see? The woman looked at how serious he looked, and her smile faded. Are you joking? Morrison swirled his wine. Yes, you can't see them, and only I can. After my wife jumped off a building, I've always been able to see her. Look, she's glaring at you. I think you should leave. I don't want her to haunt you tonight. The woman shuddered and left after calling him crazy. He shook his head. Why are women so rude now? He was going to pour another glass and noticed a woman sitting next to him. He jumped, but the woman said to the bartender, "A mojito, please." When Morrison recognized her, he wanted to sneak away, but the woman grabbed him. It's you. He clenched his jaw, clicked his tongue, and turned to face Leah. What kind of luck is this? How could I bump into you in a place like this? Leah smiled. Maybe it's fate. Bullshit. I don't want to be fated to be around you. Morrison watched as the bartender placed the cocktail in front of her. She picked it up and was going to drink it, but Morrison blocked her. You're very brave to still drink after what happened the other day. Chapter 2623. Must this woman drink? Leah paused and slowly said, that was just an accident. I'll be careful this time. She then looked at him. Are you alone? Well, do you see anyone else? Oh, you're sitting on my friend, he casually said. Leah looked at her seat. Sitting on your friend. Morrison poured a glass for himself, smiled, and considered scaring her. Yes, do you want to know more about it? But it's best that you don't know. You might not be able to sleep tonight. Leah picked up her mojito and took a drink. I'm even more curious now. Morrison saw that she wasn't tricked, so he clicked his tongue. You're so daring. Let me tell you then. My friend jumped off a building not too long ago and died terribly. Her head split open. You're sitting on her, and she's not happy about it at all, so be careful tonight. She might stand next to your bed, and you'll be in trouble. He thought that would scare her away, but Leah laughed instead. You're telling me a horror story, huh? Morrison didn't know what to say. She placed down the glass. Why did your friend jump? Life is short, and we're going to die anyway. So, why did she want to end it early? Morrison slapped his forehead. She believed him and wasn't even scared. He poured more wine. Are you not scared at all? Why should I be scared? Leah looked at him. I heard a lot of horror stories 10 years ago, and I was afraid then, but then years later, I don't feel the same anymore. Dead people aren't scarier than living ones. Morrison laughed dryly. Oh, I thought you were one of the silly girls. I guess you have some brains too. Why would I not have brains? Well, were you thinking the last time? Morrison mocked her. You left your brain at home. What a woman did was able to silence you. Besides, you drank so much at the bar that day. Children from elementary school have a better sense of danger than you. Leah didn't speak. He was so straightforward, but she didn't have anything to refute. Morrison saw that her head was hanging low and didn't reply, so he thought he had crossed the line. He wouldn't know how to act if she started crying. He cleared his throat. I just want you to remember. Get a few more drinks and go home. Don't stay out too late. Leah's eyes darted around. Why are you here then? We're not the same. No one would do anything to me even if I ended up under the bridge. Leah paused. Wouldn't it affect the town's image? Morrison chuckled. I'm just joking. Leah was feeling a little sad when she came over, but she suddenly felt a lot happier and ordered a few more cocktails. Morrison looked at her. Have you lost your mind? She paid. You're still here. I'll buy you drinks as a sign of gratitude. Morrison smiled. You're going to buy me drinks and send me to the police station like what happened the last time. Leah paused and looked awkward. It won't happen again, I promise. At Emperor, Cameron stood in front of the window while holding a cup of coffee. Fireworks went off in the distance, and the light reflected on the glass, adding color to the night sky. Waylon walked over and hugged her from behind. Do you want to go back to the East Islands after this? Chapter 2624. Cameron paused. Why do you ask? If you want to, I'll go with you. Waylon rested his chin on her head. Cameron turned to face him. Shouldn't you bring me to Stoslow instead? He paused. Do you want to go? You said that you have friends to introduce to me. It's not too much if I meet them, right? He squinted. Are you sure you just want to see my friends? Cameron placed the coffee cup on the table and hugged his neck. You know everyone on the East Islands, but I don't know anyone from the night banquet. Shouldn't I say hello to them? Waylon chuckled and tapped the tip of her nose. Sure, as long as you're happy. He picked her up and walked to their bed. It was 11 p.m., and the streets were already quiet. Many shops were closed, and only a few cars drove under the bridge. See, I said that I would not get drunk tonight. Leah rolled down the window on the passenger side. A cold breeze blew in, and she was even more awake. Morrison, who was driving, laughed. Proud that you're not drunk, aren't you? Leah looked at him. I still don't know your name. Morrison said, there's no need to know because we won't meet again. She paused for a few seconds and then asked, what if we do? Morrison calmly replied, if we do, I'll tell you my name, but I don't think such a ridiculous thing will happen again. Bassburg was a big city. He wouldn't believe that they would still meet if they didn't have friends in common or each other's contacts. Leah nodded. All right. The car was parked outside the Yunge residence, and she saw that the lights in the living room were still on. She guessed that her father was still awake. Leah got out of the car, and another car passed next to her. Zephyr, who was driving, turned back to look and saw Leah getting out of a man's car. She stood in the garden and watched as Morrison drove away, looking like she was in a good mood. Zephyr stopped the car as Leah looked across the street, surprising her. He walked out of the car, looked in the direction where the car drove off, and walked over. Why are you home so late? Were you drinking? He could smell the alcohol on her. She controlled her emotions and smiled. Yes, I did. So what, Mr. Gosling? When Zephyr spoke to her in the past, she would be overjoyed, but after what happened at the cafe, she was utterly disappointed in him. His eyes darted around, and he clenched his jaw. I'm sorry about what happened. Leah pressed her lips together. Her heart would still skip a beat when he was around. After a long moment, she spoke. I always thought that you would change, Zephyr. I thought you would at least respect yourself like how you did in the past. He didn't speak. Leah smiled. Did you know that you're most attractive when you are persistent about something? You were persistent about Daisy, as if nothing could change the way you felt about her. But then you changed, and I felt like you became a stranger. Zephyr raised his brow. Leah, you're criticizing me just because I'm dating Roxy. What did I do wrong? I have no chance with Daisy anymore, but am I still not allowed to be with someone else? It's not that you can't be with someone else. Leah looked sad. If you really found the girl that you like, I would wish the best for you. But are you sincere toward them? Chapter 2625. Zephyr fell silent. You always had different dates. Now it's Roxy's turn. Was it worth changing for even if she looks a lot like Daisy? Leah's eyes were red because she felt that her decade of feelings wasn't worth it. She liked Zephyr because he was loyal to Daisy and would secretly do things for her. She thought that Zephyr was a loyal person, and even when he found out that Daisy was getting married, he was sad for some time. However, she still stayed by his side without complaining and helped him heal, even if he didn't have feelings for her. She believed that one day he would eventually notice. But what happened? What she saw was Zephyr getting new girlfriends, one after the other, and the reason he gave them for the breakups was that they weren't compatible. Then he met Roxy, who stayed longer than any other woman by this side. It was all because she looked like Daisy and even copied Daisy's style. He knew that she wasn't Daisy but still chose to date her as a replacement. He even belittled Leah, who had been friends with him for more than a decade. Zephyr looked up at Leah. Are you unhappy that I'm with Roxy because you have feelings for me? If you like me, why didn't you say so earlier on? Leah was surprised, then burst out laughing. You know that I have feelings for you. Why would you care so much about me and stay by my side if not because of that? Her tears rolled down her cheeks because her heart ached so much. So you knew, but you pretended not to. Zephyr looked down. I thought we would always be friends, so I didn't want to cross that line. Leah bit her lip, looked up, and started laughing, letting all the sorrow in her heart out. So, you've always played with my feelings. I tried my best to make you happy when I stayed by your side. You knew how I felt but pretended not to. You didn't want to cross that line but never rejected me when I treated you well. Leah, you should have just told me that I never had the chance. She pushed him away and yelled, why did you have to watch as I bare my heart like an idiot but didn't tell me that you knew all along? You should have rejected me when I went to spend time with you. You knew why I care, but you asked me not to. But you knew why I did that all along. He knew how she felt but always pretended that he didn't. Wasn't that cruel? He knew that she had feelings for him but would still flirt with other women in front of her. Was he mocking her or trying to make her feel disgusted? Zephyr walked forward and was going to say something, but Leah raised her hand to stop him and took 2 steps back. I don't want to see you anymore from now on. She turned and walked into the villa. Leah's father, who was standing at the window, saw her coming in and immediately sat down on the couch pretending to be watching the television. When the door slammed shut, she went straight up the stairs. Her dad watched her and fell into deep thought. 3 days later, Leah's father was having lunch with Zephyr's parents when they mentioned Leah. He looked awkward and said, she went to visit some relatives. She was actually on a blind date. Chapter 2626. Patricia seemed to have noticed something had happened between her son and Leah. What's more, her son was being bewitched by a woman she did not like, so her face was dark. Zephyr doesn't even want to come home now. He just wants to stay outside. I really don't understand what's so good about that woman. Alexander said, all right. This is his own choice. He's a grown adult. We can't help him make decisions now. Patricia sighed. I thought Leah was going to become my daughter-in-law. Benjamin chuckled and said, it's fine. It isn't going to affect our relationship anyway. At Yaramore, at Blue Valley Manor, Daisy walked to the flower garden with her big belly and watered the roses in the courtyard, hoping that they would bloom beautifully in the spring. Nalles approached her and took the watering can from her. Didn't I say you should rest more? She pursed her lips and said, I either sit or eat and sleep every day. I feel like I'm going to become a mushroom soon. Nalles chuckled and helped her to water the plant. Just bear with it for a little longer. You can do whatever you want after the babies are born. You make it sound like it's so easy. Why don't you go ahead and give birth to a baby? Nalles wrapped his arm around her shoulders and replied, well, I'd gladly do that if I could. Daisy caressed her stomach and asked, do you think the twins are boys or girls? Nalles put down the watering can, squatted in front of her, and listened. After a short while, he said, I heard it. She asked curiously, what did you hear? Chuckling, Nalles replied, I heard the sound of a naughty boy and a little princess. Daisy frowned. Are you sure? Nalles slowly stood up and carried Daisy into the house. Since we don't know their gender, we might as well say one of them is a boy, and the other is a girl. Daisy sat on the couch, and then she saw that there was a text message on her phone. She picked it up and realized that Leah had texted her about half an hour ago. Daisy, I've already cut off my friendship with Zephyr. Daisy was stunned, and she hastily replied. What happened? Leah was sitting in a restaurant when she received Daisy's reply. She picked her phone up and hesitated for a moment before replying to her. Honestly, I've liked him for a very long time, but I'm really disappointed now. I thought he didn't know what I thought about him, but I didn't expect him not only to know but also to play me like an idiot. I'm tired. Daisy was stunned. She had not been talking to Zephyr ever since she left the crew because of the incident. She felt that Zephyr had changed. He did not seem like the person she used to know. After that, she heard that he had gotten a new girlfriend, and then she did not hear anything about him anymore. Her eyelashes fluttered as she replied. D, have you never told him about it? L, why should I tell him about how I feel since I already knew it'd never work out between us? He can turn a blind eye to my feelings even though he knows about them, so it won't change anything even if I tell him about my feelings. L, anyway, it doesn't matter anymore since it's an unrequited love. Maybe some people aren't meant for each other. This should be the will of God. I've already moved on. She was not the kind of woman who would still linger on after being rejected by other people. Although she felt a little bit sad, things happened, and there were always times when people were blinded by their emotions. The waiter served the food after she chatted with Daisy for a while. She put her phone away, took a deep breath, and began eating her food. She had decided to move on. At the end of the year, she would make a new plan for her life. Chapter 2627. A man approached Leah and asked, "Are you Miss Yunch?" Leah raised her head. She thought the man her father introduced was not coming anymore. She was going to leave after she finished everything, but to her dismay, he came in the end. She smiled. "Yeah, it's me. Please have a seat." The man sat down and looked at the food on the table. Leah continued to smile and said, "I'm sorry. It's the third day of the new year. I thought you were not coming anymore since it has already been half an hour." The man was rendered speechless. After all, Leah implied he was half an hour late. "I was caught up by something. Anyway, Miss Yunch, I heard you worked as an interpreter while abroad." Without putting down her fork, Leah replied, "Yeah. I'm still considering whether I should go back or not after this." Maintaining a smile on his face, he asked, "You're planning to go back there?" "It depends on my situation," said Leah. After that, she raised her head to look at the man and continued. "If we're getting married, I might stay here or overseas, depending on my job. Can you accept it, Mr. Isaiah?" Isaiah was stunned. Leah continued, "Of course, if you want to. I hope we can get married as soon as possible. Although our property after marriage is shared, I hope we can take care of our own finances ourselves. In other words, you take care of your money, and I take care of mine. As for the baby, I don't want to have a baby so soon. I hope we can wait for a few years after my job situation has stabilized. When we have a baby, I want to hire a nanny so that I can focus on my career." "Wait a moment," Isaiah chimed in. "This is the first time we meet each other, so don't you think it's a bit too soon to talk about marriage?" Leah asked, "Isn't that what this blind date is about? If we like each other, we can go and get our marriage license right away." Isaiah scoffed, and his voice changed. "Miss Yunch, are you worried that you can't get married? The reason I came for a blind date is that I hope I can find someone who has a mutual interest with me. At least we should test for a while first and see if we're meant for each other or not. I don't think there's anyone who can stand it if you talk about marriage right off the bat. If you can't take it, you can leave. I didn't ask you to stay," said Leah. Isaiah rose to his feet and said, "What a strange woman." He stormed away after sitting for less than 5 minutes. Leah popped another piece of meat into her mouth and took another sip of soup. After that, she put the cash on the table and left. She rushed over when the elevator was about to close and shouted, "Hold the door." The door opened again, and she saw 3 people upon entering the elevator. Other than Waylon, there was one woman standing beside him, and the third person was none other than Morrison. Morrison raised his hand to block his face and turned his head to the side. He did not expect to run into Leah here at all. Waylon chuckled and said, "What a coincidence, Leah." "Yeah, what a coincidence," Leah replied with a smile. She entered the elevator and asked, "Are you guys here for a meal?" "Yeah, we just finished our meal," replied Waylon. After that, he wrapped his arm around Cameron and continued. "This is my wife. Her name is Cameron." Cameron smiled and greeted her. "Hi." Then, she glanced at Morrison and mouthed, "Is she Miss Yunch?" Leah also looked at Morrison. Waylon smiled meaningfully. "He's my friend. You can call him Morrison." Leah nodded. "I see. So, your name is Morrison." Morrison gnashed his teeth and said, "Ha, it seems like Bassburg is such a small city." Before going their separate ways the last time, he had said that they would never see each other again, but reality gave him a huge slap across his face. Cameron leaned closer to Waylon and asked, "What's wrong with them?" Waylon chuckled. "Well, just as what you think it is." When they arrived at the first floor, all of them came out of the elevator. Morrison was walking behind Leah, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt something was wrong. He turned his head around and asked, "You didn't put a GPS on me, did you?" Chapter 2628. Leah was stunned and shook her head. "So, how can you explain this? I'm sure there is more than one restaurant in Bassburg, right?" Leah shrugged. "But there aren't many high-end restaurants in Bassburg either." Morrison chortled and asked, "Then can't you pick another restaurant with a lower ranking?" "Well, it doesn't matter since I already know your name now." Leah smiled. After that, she turned around and left. Morrison clicked his tongue, feeling he had been taken advantage of. Waylon drove the car over and locked the door after Cameron got in. Morrison went to the passenger seat and knocked on the window when he couldn't open the door. "What are you doing?" Waylon looked at him and smiled. "We still have another date left, so you're on your own now." "What? You?" Without waiting for him to finish his sentence, Waylon stepped on the accelerator and drove the car away. Morrison looked at the car that was disappearing from his vision and snorted exasperatingly. "He didn't think I was a nuisance earlier, and now he thinks I am. HMPH. Men, they're all the same." Morrison stood with his hands on his waist and watched as Leah entered her car. While she was putting on her seatbelt, the door to the passenger seat was opened, and Morrison entered her car. She was stunned for a moment as she looked at Morrison in surprise. "I thought you already left with them. They have other plans, so I'm not going to be the killjoy to spoil their fun." Leah nodded and started the car. While they were on the road, Morrison did not expect Leah to drive so fast. He grabbed tightly at the handle and said, "Can you slow down a bit? I don't really want to die here." Leah replied, "I'm driving at a normal speed. You're driving at 80 miles per hour while overtaking cars. Hey, slow down." Morrison's heart was in his throat. When Leah stopped the car at the side of Bassburg River, Morrison looked outside through the river and asked, "Where is this place?" "Under the bridge. I thought you lived here." Morrison was rendered speechless. If he had heart disease, he would be dead now. Morrison gritted his teeth and said, "Since when did I tell you that I live under the bridge?" Leah turned her head to look at him and said, "You didn't tell me where you live after you got into the car. So where do you want me to take you?" Morrison was rendered speechless again. Leah was right. He had not told her where he lived. He took a deep breath and nodded. "Century Hotel. Please turn around, thank you." Leah turned the car around and sent him to Century Hotel. When Morrison got out of the car, he gave Leah his contact number and said, "Don't call me unless it's absolutely necessary." After that, he entered the hotel. Leah picked up the name card from the seat and chuckled. "He's rather adorable." At the Goldman mansion, when Nicholas returned, he cleaned the garden while Maisie and Nolan cleaned the windows. After everything was done, the entire mansion looked new. Nicholas slowly rose to his feet and said, "Nolan, it has been a few years since we visited Mother's grave. Why don't you and Maisie accompany me over there today?" Nolan nodded. "Okay." At 1:30 p.m., they drove off to the cemetery. The cemetery was situated at the foot of the hill. It was a very quiet place, and an open field was in front of it. Nicholas brought them to a tombstone. The picture on the tombstone was Natasha's photo before she was dead. She had a beautiful smile, and her face looked gentle. She indeed did not fail her name as the most beautiful woman in the entertainment industry. "It has been a few years since I last came to visit you," Nicholas said as he took away the wilted flower in front of the tombstone. "It's another new year, so I brought our son and daughter-in-law to come and see you. Our grandsons and granddaughter have all grown up and formed their own families. Time really flies in the blink of an eye." Chapter 2629. Nolan put the stuff in his hands down and said, "Dad, let's clean Mom's tombstone first. Look at all these blades of grass." Nicholas nodded. He wore gloves and started cleaning the weeds and grass around the tombstone. Maisie also helped them. It took them about half an hour to clean up the weeds around the tombstone. Nicholas put a new bouquet of white roses in a basket of fruits that she liked to eat before she died in front of the tombstone. Nolan and Maisie decided to leave some private time for Nicholas. Both of them came out of the cemetery and looked into the distance. "Dad has been thinking about Mom all these years after she passed away. They must have loved each other very much." Nolan hugged Maisie in his arms. They had a great relationship for as long as I can remember. As my grandfather said, my father's weakness was my mother, and he lost to a woman just like my great-grandfather. Maisie chuckled. Well, he still willingly lost to a woman after he had woken up. You're right, replied Nolan. After he finished speaking, Nolan looked at her and asked, Maisie, what if I die before you? What would you do? Her eyelashes fluttered, and she grinned. I'll find another man to keep me company then. He frowned. That's it. She looked at Nolan and raised her eyebrows. You'll be about 80 to 90 years old by the time you die. I'll be an old woman as well. I'll only be able to play for a few more years before I'll have to go down to look for you. He chuckled and said, You're right. Holding his hand, Maisie said, We can't live forever. Our kids have all grown up, and we even have grandchildren already. There's no need to worry about so much. We should just let life take its course. Nolan held her hand, and they hugged each other. The next day, at a gym. How could you leave me alone yesterday? Wayne, are you still my friend? How could you do that to me? Morrison scolded Waylon for leaving him alone yesterday while holding a barbell with one arm. Waylon was making breakfast. He put his phone on the loudspeaker as he said, What's the matter? Do you have any problem with that? No, I don't have any problem with that. After all, one is bound to be the third wheel when there are 3 people. Cameron and I will be going to Stoslow in another 2 days. When Morrison heard what Waylon said, he put the barbell down. What? I only came here not long ago, and you guys are leaving already. Waylon chuckled. You can come with us if you want. Morrison stood up and walked up to the window with one of his arms on his waist. There are still a lot of things I want to do here. Then you can stay here. But I don't know anyone else other than you. Who else can I ask to bring me around the city? Your great-grandfather. Do you think I'm out of my mind? Waylon took a look at his phone and replied, What about Leah? You know each other, right? Leah. Morrison took a deep breath and said, I'd be really out of my mind if I went to look for that woman. All right, I'm busy, so you're on your own now. Waylon hung up the call. He turned his head around and saw that Cameron was leaning against the wall with a glass of milk in her hand. It seemed like she had been listening to their conversation for a long time. He put his phone down and chuckled. What's the matter? Cameron took a sip from the milk and walked into the kitchen. Since when did you start to work part-time as a matchmaker, huh? Waylon turned off the fire and put the steak on the plate. I'm not a matchmaker. I just feel that they could make a good couple, so I decided to give him a little push. But I can do nothing if he doesn't cherish the opportunity. Chapter 2630. Cameron chuckled and asked, Did Miss Yunge attend the same school as you? Yeah, all of us attended the same school. Waylon placed the steak nicely on the plate before taking it to the table. What's the matter? Are you jealous of her? She was just my classmate. I'm not. I'm just curious. Cameron came out of the kitchen and put the glass of milk on the table. She pulled the chair and sat down. I don't even contact my classmates. It seems to me that you guys have a lot of classmates. Waylon sat down as well and asked, Why? Cameron said, Because I attended military school in southern Eurasia. All of my classmates were men. My father knew someone from the school, so they gave me an independent dorm. When I first arrived there, all of them looked down on me and bullied me in secret because they all thought I was a sissy with some background. I wasn't someone who would let others bully me, so I took revenge on them and beat them all up every time after the physical training session. Since then, no one dared to badmouth me. They became very scared of me, and I haven't seen them since I graduated. Waylon frowned after listening to Cameron. However, he could also understand her since she used to have a group of men around her in the past. He chuckled and said, If we have a son in the future, it'll be good if he inherits your personality, but I hope our daughter won't become like you. Cameron grabbed him by his collar and asked, What do you mean by that? Are you looking down on me? He laughed and lowered his head to kiss her. I'm not. Isn't it good if our son inherits your personality and our daughter inherits mine? Cameron thought for a while and felt Waylon was right. If their son looked like her in the future, then no one would be able to bully him. As for their daughter, if she looked like Waylon. Cameron looked at Waylon and thought, oh my, wouldn't she be very good looking? She was looking forward to how good and beautiful her future daughter would look. Waylon brought Cameron to Stoslow. Cameron put on a blindfold and slept after getting on the plane. She rarely took a plane because she would get airsick. She only ordered some snacks and drinks throughout the entire flight. Seeing how uncomfortable she was, Waylon put her head on his shoulder and said, it looks like we'll have to take the water route on the way back. And we can go to the East Islands as well. It took only 2 hours from Stoslow to the East Islands by cruise. Cameron took off her blindfold and cried, if I had known that the plane would take so long, I should have gone back to the East Islands first. Waylon kissed her forehead and said, all right. You should get some rest. If you still feel uncomfortable, I'll ask the flight attendant to get you some air sickness medicine. Cameron buried herself in his chest. This was the first time Waylon saw Cameron in such a weakened state. He stroked her hair and lulled her to sleep. Meanwhile, Leah attended her high school classmate's wedding that was held at the beach today. When she arrived at the venue, a few of her classmates greeted her. It has been a long time, Leah. I heard that you've become an interpreter. Leah replied with a smile, yeah, but I'm on a break right now, and I'm still considering whether I should keep working in this industry or not. Her classmate replied, I think you should. Working as an interpreter is good. At the very least, it's a secure job. At the same time, Zephyr and Roxy arrived. They all looked at them when they heard the commotion. One of the female classmates said, is that Zephyr's girlfriend? I think so. She looks quite a lot like Daisy, don't you think? All of them were surprised, and Leah was the only one who kept silent. When one of them asked Leah to see if she knew something, she just laughed. I have no idea either.